Five, four, three, two, one. There's always serendipity. So yes, this is a special episode. Matt from Nervos, thank you for joining.
It's great to be here, Dean. Thank you for taking the time to have this discussion.
Yeah, the reason I wanted to have it is because serendipity, two separate interviews, people have mentioned Nervos. My antenna peak up, always when people that I like, the way kind of people come on the show is it's like this chain of referrals, right? So it's not just like random people are showing up. And the fact that both, who was it? Tom from F2 Pool.
F2, yeah.
And also Eric from Cartesi. I don't know if you know Cartesi.
I don't know. What's that?
Yeah, they've got a Linux model for developing dApps. So basically, if you're comfortable with like the tools you have for Linux development, you can use those to deploy blockchain dApps. Yeah,
that's moving in the right direction. That's really good to see.
Yes. So I want to make this completely focused on Nervos. I'm coming in as like, I know that's proof of work.
Sure.
I know that you guys have your own mining algorithm, which is a fantastic choice. That makes you the apex predator of your mining algorithm. You don't have to sit there and be worried that someone's just going to switch their machines over and attack you. And I know that you have a testnet competition going on right now that F2 Pool is part of.
Yes. Yeah, the fourth round of the testnet competition just wrapped up. I believe there's going to be a couple more, but the number of rounds hasn't been kind of communicated, but we're going to continue doing testnet competitions.
Okay, so we know it's proof of work. We know that right now people can get involved, start mining their own coins by getting involved in the testnet.
Yes.
And we know that you have your own mining algorithm. Can you explain a bit how maybe the nodes work? Are these incentivized nodes? How does the node distribution work?
Sure. So one thing in approaching Nervos is a lot of things have kind of been taken from like what worked in Bitcoin. So the nodes are not incentivized. But the idea is to have like a large network of decentralized low cost full nodes.
Excellent. And so that brings up a next question, which is like, what's the block size? What's your strategy there?
So the block size is variable. I guess it would be similar to Ethereum in some sort of like compute cycle size of the blocks. And then there's a kind of a variable time consensus. So the consensus protocol is going to adapt based on the number of orphan or uncle blocks that you have on the chain. So if the network of full nodes is tightly connected, you're not going to see many orphaned blocks, or I guess uncle blocks, because we're including them. And as the network starts to lose that tight connectivity, then the orphan rate's going to go up, and then the consensus protocol will increase difficulty as well, so that the blocks will slow down.
Okay, I mean, everything, it sounds like there's been a lot of thought towards this, and it sounds like it's not just a currency that is there a Turing completeness to this? Is this a smart contract platform as well?
Yes, so we use the term scripting, which I think is easier for a lot of people, especially newer people to blockchain, to kind of get what's going on there. Yeah, there's Turing complete scripting. There's a new virtual machine, which is another unique thing about the project. It's a RISC-V virtual machine, so it's kind of like a physical computer in terms of like what the level of abstraction is. You have an instruction set and the smart contracts, or I guess we should say scripts. I'll keep it consistent. They're very low level, so any programming language could be supported. Right now, all the tutorials are in C, and I know there's a push to support JavaScript smart contracts or scripts.
Okay, so now that's starting to sound like this is a competitor to something like Ethereum. At the same time, it doesn't sound like there's any plan to move towards like a proof of stake.
No, I think Ethereum, Cosmos, Polkadot, they're kind of occupying a bit of a different space where they're building kind of like a massive network of blockchains that kind of all come to consensus on like a single shard chain or relay chain in Polkadot. Whereas on Nervos, there's just a single chain, similar to the, I guess, network architecture of Bitcoin or Ethereum today. So you want a lot of decentralization on your nodes, and the way that scaling is achieved is by moving almost all the transactions to layer 2.
Now, okay, so I definitely want to get into how this affects computation. I want to get into
Sure.
scalability in a bit. On the distribution side, how is that going to be distributed in the beginning? Is it going to mirror Bitcoin in that everything's just going to be mined? Is there going to be a sale as well? What's the initial distribution, and how do you get to a point where it has as much of a wide fair initial distribution?
Sure. There was a private sale, and there's also going to be a public sale, and that will be about the same amount that will be issued through the base issuance of mining. And then there's also a secondary issuance on top of that, which gets a little complicated. I think in terms of wide distribution, in order to hold assets on Nervos, you need to hold the native token. So anyone that would be, say, holding, the equivalent of ERC20 tokens today would need that native CKByte token. Each byte entitles you to a byte on the ledger. So the wide distribution, I think, would come through utilization of the side chains and state channels that are being used on the ledger.
Okay, so today it sounds like it mirrors a bit the way Ethereum kind of started off. Just
yeah, similar. Yeah, you're bootstrapping the network with some sort of native asset issuance and then doing mining.
And in that case, there was, I believe, 70% of the distribution was a pre-mine sold for Ethereum. What's the percentage here with Nervos?
So it's 50% compared to the base issuance, and then you have secondary issuance on top of it, which the numbers are out there. The secondary issuance will continue forever, and it functions like state rent in the Ethereum community. So that inflation will continue. So over time, I guess similar to Ethereum here, the percentage that was pre-mined will go down.
Interesting. So you meant when you said that the second issuance, that means that there's not a fixed cap on supply?
Correct.
Excellent. Okay. And that mirrors, if I think about POW, that mirrors maybe like a grin, for example.
In some ways, yes. There's a mechanism that's been implemented that long-term holders can lock up their tokens in this contract on the platform called the Nervos DAO. So users who aren't using their tokens to store data on the blockchain, their tokens their holdings will function like a hard capped token, because they'll receive back their inflation rewards. A lot of thought has gone into the economic side of the platform.
Wow, that's really interesting. So if you're not using it and you're using it as a store of value, its store of value properties maintained because you're going to be getting back a reward that's equal to the amount of issuance.
Yes, that's correct.
Wow. I would love to, now I need to like share this with, some of my more on the economic side friends to figure out how that all works. But
sure.
My initial gut reaction is I like it. So we've gone over distribution. We've gone over the consensus algorithm. I love hearing that you're following Bitcoin on the nodes. I'm not a fan of incentivized node structures. On governance and decentralization, usually,
sure.
It's very hard for any project that has a foundation, that has a sale, for those to, ultimately be fully decentralized. What's the roadmap towards decentralization, and how do you see governance comparing to some other well-known platforms?
Sure. I think at this point, there's a lot of an appreciation of the challenge. Nothing has been kind of formally set forth in terms of like, this is how we will decentralize governance. It is in the position paper that eventually governance will move to the token holders. I would say right now, the idea is to be very kind of community oriented and support, like I'm supported through a community grant, and the kind of like the nature of the project continues to move in that direction. And, nothing's guaranteed, but I think we've looked at, like, even again in the position paper, there's a lot of, there's reference to how Linux is governed or how EOS tried to govern, or Tezos and or Polkadot. So there's no in protocol governance, and yeah, we'll see how that all plays out. Yeah.
And like, I gotta applaud you. You're giving all the answers that people should want to hear, right? Which is, hey, we don't know. Rather than, oh, we're massively decentralized from inception. We figured out everything in
yes, it's very hard to know everything. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's refreshing. And the CKByte sounds like definitely not a flash in the pan project token. When do you think it's going to be available for people to purchase? It's going to be available to the general public.
The tokens won't be released until the mainnet is launched, which is sometime in the fourth quarter of this year. If people are eligible for the public sale, they can go find the eligibility criteria. They can get tokens soon. But as far as like the public at large, it'll be once the network launches. Excellent.
Okay, so we'll share all those links also in the description. That way people can get more acquainted, and also if they're interested, of course, we'll also share the white paper. So now that we've kind of gone over some of the base stuff that I like to ask about,
sure.
Which, as I said, I would call you out on anything that I didn't like the sound of.
At any point, feel free. Yeah, engaging discussions are great. That's where we get good information. Yeah.
I agree, and I feel like some of these questions I use are shortcuts, right? So you make my job easy by saying you're a proof of work chain. Okay, I don't have to go through your complex POS idea.
Same here. Yeah.
Same thing with the node structure. Like I honestly, I don't know if incentivized nodes are the way to go. My gut tells me go with what Bitcoin's been doing, but
yep. Tried and true. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that you're very open about saying, look, we don't know what governance model's the best. We're examining what other people are doing. That's all refreshing to hear. So I want to understand more about like things like block size when we were talking about scalability, computation. One of the things that Ethereum's going through right now is this kind of, you see that they're moving in this, okay, we're going to have to go big block, we're going to have to go centralized node in Fura, because it's just gargantuan to run what are called these scary full nodes. What do you think is how Nervos will grow? Do you anticipate that you're going to do everything to keep the chain smaller? Do you anticipate leaning into centralized node structures?
So again, going back to a lot of the nature of the project being economic. So with that, CKByte, the users actually own the space on the chain that their data is occupying. And that should incentivize efficient use of the chain. I think today on, pretty much, well, I guess any blockchain, if I put data on that chain, there's no cost to me. Once I pay my transaction fee, it's just there and it's going to stay there forever. And even on Ethereum, if somebody airdrops me some tokens, I guess I could sell them and move my balance to zero, and that would get rid of it. But there's really no incentive for me to do that. So with the CKByte, if the data that's being, I guess the data that sits on the chain, or the storage that a user is occupying, if that data isn't worth very much to them, then they're losing the value of their underlying CKBytes to inflation. So they would have an interest in clearing that data out. I think the the size of the nodes, at least in state size, will be constrained by the issuance. So, on day one, that you have your, CK bytes that are issued, and then with every block, the number of bytes that are issued, is increasing.
Right.
But there is kind of that fundamental limit on how much state can be stored at a particular time.
So if I'm a developer, I need to hold a large, I mean, I need to hold an amount of CK byte relative to my data, my dApp's data needs.
Just the execution logic, like what the developer, say, would deploy on a smart contract on Ethereum today, the developer would need to hold those bytes. But then, say if a user is using that application, then they need to use their bytes. So say if I deploy a token, I need to have the bytes to deploy that token. But if users are going to hold those tokens, then they need to have bytes to store their token balances.
Wow. So is this analogous to like looking at RAM, for example, when you're looking at the memory usage, or like how would
I don't I don't want to bring in if we start talking about RAM and resource pricing, and people are going to start thinking about EOS, and it's going to get all kind of jumbled in their brains. The best analogy that we've found is land. So if you wanted to build a house, you would need to own land, in order to build that house. So on the CKB, the Nervos blockchain, you would need to hold those CK bytes in order to store assets on there, to store your tokens.
Okay, so I mean, I definitely am not technical enough to really do this dance.
Sure, yeah.
But I respect that from the little I'm understanding. I need to have, I have to care about how much data I'm creating and how much of a load I'm putting on the network. You're forcing me to care about the value of the data. Correct,
yeah. Well, I guess, through, a cost, because there's a cost, you'll care. That's the way people operate.
Right, whereas today on Ethereum, I have to care about the compute just as a a fee for as a one-time fee. I mean, what's that difference?
So on Ethereum today, if you wanted to occupy some storage, if you wanted to store your data, you need to pay a one-time fee. And Nervos will have transaction fees as well. But on Nervos, you'll incur in an ongoing fee to having that data on there, and that's imposed through inflation.
Got it. So if I have, I mean, will I need to constantly grow my holdings of CK bytes based on how many, based on my user growth?
No, I mean, so you're a developer in this context?
Yes.
Okay. No, the developers,
Hello?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I lost you for a second there.
Okay.
So
all right. So
developers.
So yeah, you're the developer. So if we think of it like deploying, you deploy your program, and then users that want to use your program, they would need CK bytes. And if you have more users come on, then the new users would have to acquire CK bytes as well. But from a developer's perspective, they just need the amount of bytes that stores their program.
Wow. Okay, now it's starting to make sense, and I like that. I mean, basically, if it grows, all the users are the ones who are paying for the compute, for the usage of the network. Me, I have that one time, hey, this is the place, this is the land. Interesting, the land analogy. I guess it's not perfect, but I see how it works. Because at the same time, me driving to your, I mean, I guess I'm building a road, driving to your house, to your land to use it.
There's the land is all in one city. You have people building the houses in the city, and they all need their pieces of land.
Okay, now what were you doing? How, what happened? This team that decided to make Nervos, what were you all doing? How did you come to this idea? How did you get together?
Sure. I think that in some ways it was an outgrowth of the Ethereum community. So there's ETH fans, which Jan, the chief architect of Nervos, he started ETH fans, I think in 2015. I've organized Ethereum meetups for a while. I think it's just a number of different people. I think the co-founders all knew each other. They were working on a podcast. They were building exchanges, permission chains. I think it is, I think, seriously just the growth of like these networks that were pre-existing. And I think as, you know, like a brainworm, as people kind of heard about the idea and a bit of, you know, an alternative to a lot of the other systems that are being proposed. I think even, you know, when I came into the Ethereum community, I was, you know, really excited about everything. And then, you know, there was kind of like this assumption that everyone in the community was on board with proof of stake. And I was like, well, I don't know about that. I just kind of figured there might be like a fork, you know, when proof of stake came, that there would be this fork in the Ethereum community that continued on proof of work. But, you know, once, you know, just hearing about this project and, you know, understanding how much thought had gone into it, like I just jumped on board.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar revelation that got me interested in Ethereum Classic, because I'm just I can wrap my head around proof of work.
Yes, yeah.
You know, and it made it a lot easier.
Yeah, there's real value to like the, you know, the man on the street, you know, comprehension, and I think it's a sign of like sound engineering, I think. And you know, proof of stake is, you know, supremely complicated, and there's been a ton of great research that's gone into it, and it'll produce, you know, fantastic protocols. But, you know, in terms of like that base layer consensus and, you know, just in the interest of sticking with what got us here, I think to me proof of work is very appealing.
Yeah, and you know, it speaks to what all of blockchain's revelation, what the revolution's all about, which is, you know, figuring out these incentive models. And, you know, the proof of work incentive model seems to be perfect, whereas these POS ones, that's where it's getting a little dicey, right? Where it's like, well, you don't really have an unforgeable costliness that you're committing. Anyway.
You do, but it's contained in the, you know, in the thing that you're starting with, in the ledger. Yeah, I try to approach the proof of work, proof of stake argument, and just, you know, do we have the data? You know, like we have 10 years of a proof of work network operating, and, you know, once we have 10 years of a proof of stake network you know, operating, then we can compare apples to apples. But we don't have the data yet. The systems are still pretty young, and they're still, you know, working out those incentives and how everything works.
Yeah, no, and it's exactly as you said. We need more evidence, and I really like the ideas that you guys have introduced. The way to maintain CKByte, CKB as a store of value for people who want to use it like that. I think that's amazing. And then you're, you know, figuring out how to scale over time. I like this use of land analogy. So right now, what you know, what are some of the issues that occupy most of your time, most of your thoughts about Nervos? Is it, you know, how to get miners on board? Is it, you know, what are some of those things we were discussing, you know, before we started, that you said, like, you know, right now you guys have so much work. What are the, you know, the main things that are occupying your time?
Sure. Yeah. Developing kind of broad visibility miners is definitely a big part of it. Of, you know, how do you, especially with, you know, Bitcoin at 10K and, you know, people having to worry about their S9s or S17s, you know, how do you get interest in, you know, mining communities? And, you know, with the POW chain, it's absolutely essential that you have support from mining communities. Broad visibility within, you know, crypto communities. And I think, you know, more on like a personal basis, I spend a lot of time thinking about, like, you know, when we're creating this, like, what is it going to be uniquely good for? Because we have, you know, how many different blockchains out there. And if it's just as simple as just doing transactions or DeFi stuff, there's so many alternatives, you know, there's so many ways that you could kind of do that. So I spend a good amount of time thinking about, you know, since we've created this new system with unique qualities, you know, what is it good for? And what, you know, who are those people that I should, you know, keep an eye out for to say, like, hey, you know, we can do something new.
You know, when you started saying this, it made me think about also some of these privacy coins that have popped up.
Sure.
Where does Nervos sit in the privacy spectrum?
Sure. So Nervos takes it generalizes things. So I guess one thing we haven't covered yet is that users can deploy cryptographic primitives onto the blockchain the same way you can with smart contracts in Ethereum today. So say like the cryptography that underlies zero knowledge proofs. The users of the blockchain could deploy that, and if there's new cryptographic innovation in a year, then users can deploy that as well. So Nervos as a platform, could support privacy coins, but the blockchain itself is completely agnostic to what's running on top of it. It's just a computer, and then say the privacy coins or the privacy preserving computation would just be an application or a program running on that computer.
So, again, just so I can download this information.
Sure. Yeah.
Right now, everything on Ethereum, I believe, is is it SHA-3 on chain? Like everything's written with a certain cryptography.
Yeah. So you can do SHA-256 or SHA-3 on Ethereum today. So there's SHA-3 is implemented in the virtual machine, and then you have the ability for core devs with a hard fork to implement additional cryptography. So I believe with Istanbul, they're going to bring some Blake stuff, so you could do transfers, say, between Zcash and Ethereum.
And Nervos on the onset will allow for any kind of cryptographic primitive, or is it that you'll still be able to do a hard fork later down the road?
Any cryptographic primitive can be deployed. It won't require a hard fork. It'll be just like deploying smart contracts on Ethereum today. And I haven't heard kind of like the list. I know in the token sale documentation, there's some reserved space that the Nervos Foundation is going to deploy stuff into, and I don't have a list of what will be contained in there, but yeah, any cryptography that's written in C, someone, if they have the CKBytes, can just deploy.
Yeah, and just talking to you about this one project opens up so many different spaces.
Glad to hear.
Yeah, and so you have the ability to deploy and as you said, it's generalized privacy, but from the onset, from an economic transaction, it's not like using Zcash or Monero or Zcoin. There will be transparency in my transactions. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So what's happening on the blockchain, similar to Bitcoin, it's you can see everything that's happening, all the transactions. Okay. There's nothing that's yeah, you would just see kind of like, instructions being executed, but you could verify all of it.
Now, on a philosophical level, do you think that it's necessary for a currency to have?
You broke up a little there. I heard necessary to have a currency, and then yeah.
I broke out for a second there. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I was saying was, do you think that Nervos is going to move towards being like a privacy coin?
No, so the nature of the blockchain is fixed. It'll be like Bitcoin. Just transactions that are done on chain are in the clear. I think in terms of the approach to privacy, it's been, I mean, I guess if you wanted to do zero knowledge stuff on chain, just use those primitives. But most of kind of like the privacy discussions end up at layer 2 of, if you don't want the entire world to know about your transactions, then do them on a side chain, do them in a payment channel.
I love that. No, and what was your base philosophy to defer to the to a layer 2 solution for privacy?
So the project just leads with that intuition of we're not going to be able to put everything on chain. The transactions need to move to layer 2, and we need to use this shared global state machine as a source of trust. And yeah, layer 2 solutions offer privacy, so it just makes sense.
That's a great answer, because you can't do everything. You gotta be humble about what your aspirations are for, and the security layer, the POW layer 1 security has to be the #1 priority.
Yep.
So I think we've covered everything I wanted to know about Nervos. So I'm definitely gonna learn more. And I hope this has answered everybody's questions. If it hasn't, we'll put contact details for the team and for Matt and for the Nervos community, for everybody to get more involved. Before I let you go, on Bitcoin, one of the things there it continues to be this discussion about block size and scalability. Luke Dash Jr. has a proposal to decrease the size of the block. What are your thoughts in that argument? Is it, we should stay at 1 megabyte, we should decrease? What's your priority there?
I think at this point, Bitcoin's been pretty well fragmented into its tribes, and I think a small blocks have the effect of creating the scarcity in transactions. So transaction fees go up if you have scarcity in transactions. So I can understand where say BTC is coming from, like having a network that delivers high transaction fees and that will withstand any any sort of attack on the network. People will just route around. Makes a lot of sense. Then you have the large blockers on the other side, which there's an argument to be made for it, but there's also a trade-off of you're going to have less nodes, and they're going to have to be people that have an incentive in running a node. I guess personally and from Nervos perspective, it is a small block approach, and the bulk of those transactions are happening on side chains or in payment channels, and with small blocks we can maintain a large decentralized network of full nodes like Bitcoin that we're still talking about more than 10 years later. It makes sense. So that's the approach. Yeah.
And the reason I asked that question is it's a philosophical one. It's figuring out where you value decentralization, and also what is your engineering approach towards dealing with the future. Do you say, I expect that bandwidth is going to be more available, there's going to be very cheap storage, so let me build towards that, which is, hey, bigger blocks, we'll figure it out later and keep nodes decentralized? And the other view is, we need to make sure that no matter what, this always stays decentralized. Who knows what the future is going to hold? So, from a philosophical level, you're also agreeing with a lot of the things that Bitcoin says, BTC. Dude, great interview. Really, it's been so much fun. And awesome. I hope that once you guys explode and have a lot of explode with potential in a good way. Once you have a lot of work going on, I hope you'll still make some time to talk to me.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation when things continue to come above ground. And I continue to get excited by what might happen. It's something else.
Yeah. So with that, I'm going to ask one more favor.
Let's do it.
So the way this happened is two people brought up Nervos.
Yep.
Who should I talk to next? What project, what person do you think I need to give more exposure to?
Have you talked to Amin Soleimani about Moloch DAO and kind of all the things that are happening there in terms of finding a kind of public resourced way of supporting Ethereum and ETH 2.0?
I have not, but
I would.
DAO is definitely on the radar. Do you know Amin, or do I need to reach out to him myself?
Yeah, you're probably better to find a way to him. Yeah.
Okay, So there you go. My challenge is set. I need to get Amin on. We got to give more exposure to Malik DAO and to Meta Cartel, all of the DAO systems that are running. I know Peter Pan, so there are a few people I know there. And yeah, Matt, thank you so much for your time, man. And
It's been great. Yeah, great talking to you today, Dean. Yeah.
Awesome. It's a wrap, brother.
All right. Have a good one, man. Thank you.